Thank you everyone for getting up early. Hopefully had a coffee or two. I've had a couple of coffees, so my talk is at least somewhat exciting for you, hopefully. Thank you so much to the organizers for inviting me. Darisha and I hung out at an amazing Neuroscience Meets AI forum in lovely Crete last year and really hit it off in terms of talking about neuroscience and neuromorphics and AI and all those sort of things. And so it's great to be here, and it's been great to meet so many people, including some familiar older faces as well. It's also great to be back in the US, as I'm sure many of you, especially if you're a grad student, being able to travel again and interact with everyone face to face is such a joyous experience. And it's been great. I've been on a 2-week tour of the US, and it's great to be able to stay in one place for more than one day or more than 24 hours and stay in the same hotel room for more than one night and actually sit down and relax for a little bit. So this is such a great way to end a whirlwind tour of the States. Today's talk is really going to be in two parts. I was joking before that it's always nice to give the last keynote because you have the last say, so to speak, and so you can sort of absorb what has been said during the conference and then say some things perhaps with relatively little right of reply, which is always a nice position to be in. So really today's talk will be split into two components. The first one, after briefly introducing who we are and what we do, I'm going to talk about 4 areas of biologically and neurally inspired mapping and navigation research projects or areas that we've worked in over the last 2 decades. And the reason I'm talking about this is I guess it's analogous to, I think, a lot of the themes that have been present in this conference of striving to seek a balance between doing fundamental blue sky research with no concrete guaranteed payoff and trying to do highly opportunistic research, which might result in new products, new technologies, and positive impact on society and industry. 2 of those projects will be in the neuromorphic or neuromorphic related space and represent, I guess, ongoing research that has been accepted for publication but has not yet been published. And I'll mention some of the many application areas that we work in. In the second part of the talk, I really want to talk about something I've been talking about this entire tour, which is really reflections on how we go about doing research in the computer science field, but with a neuromorphic lens to it. And I'm really going to talk about one key concept that we've gained from many, many years and lots of painful iteration of going from abstract fundamental blue sky research all the way to commercial research with industry partners of all varieties. And that's the concept of introspection. And I want to talk a little bit about how that might play into the hands of the neuromorphic community. And then I've got a little bit of context on, I guess, some of the interesting things I've observed from being generously invited to attend this conference, and then a summary and a wrap up. So as a disclaimer for this talk, come here with a few different hats. So I'm fortunate to co-lead a large robotics center called the QUT Center for Robotics. You've probably seen me wearing various merchandise throughout the week. I, like many people here, I'm a research group leader, so I lead a large research group with a bunch of postdocs, a large grad team, engineers, and so forth. And I'm very passionate about science outreach. I'm not going to talk about that, but we do a lot of outreach around technologies. We have a company, we do books that sell in 35 countries for kids all the way up to CEOs on topics like AI, robotics, and autonomous vehicles. And I brought a couple. If you've got kids or nephews or nieces, please feel free to take. They can't compete with a flashing neuron simulator, but hopefully they'll be of interest to someone. And even in the research field, like many of you, we span a lot of different disciplines. So we publish primarily in the robotics area. That's our bread and butter research area. But we also publish and work in computer vision. We dabble in machine learning and neuroscience and biology. And from attending a wide range of events and working with a wide range of disciplines, it's always interesting to think about a new field that you encounter, like neuromorphic engineering. I've been to Telluride once, but this is still a relatively new field. So it's been really interesting to chat with everyone over the week. So brief introductions. This is our center. This is the QUT Center for Robotics at one of our annual retreats, including all the engineers and other people not present in this picture. We're a head count a little over 100 people, all the way from undergraduates to distinguished professors. We have an in-house engineering team as well, because it's very hard to do anything with hardware unless you have engineers, talented engineers on tap. Our center does anything autonomous in any domain. So what that means is we work from fundamental research all the way to highly applied commercial research in the land, in the air, and in the sea. And when I say on land, I mean on the land and also deep underground. And when I say on the sea, I mean both on the surface of the sea and deep under the surface of the sea. So if it's an autonomous or semi-autonomous system, and it moves, flies, or swims, we have worked or have current projects in that area. In the skies, we work a lot on drones and unmanned aircraft, doing applications ranging from infrastructure inspection to tracking endangered animals to detecting invasive species. We currently have a major project deploying drones in Antarctica, and you learn all sorts of interesting things when you try and deploy robotic technology in the extreme environment that is Antarctica. On the ground, we work on robots of all descriptions, lots of work in autonomous vehicles, autonomous mining vehicles, farming vehicles, on-road autonomous vehicle technology, including with partners like Ford Motor Corporation here in the US, fruit picking robots, vegetable harvesting robots, and everything in between. And at the bottom, you can see beyond other areas like medical robotics and surgical robotics, Australia is a big place with a wonderful environment, so we work especially in the environmental and ecological areas. So robots that patrol our reefs, that fly over our natural assets and so forth, and help us do a better job of looking after them. One of the important things is we don't just work on the technology, we work on the enabling technology, policy input, and so forth. At the top left, you can see what looks like it's a flight path visualization. So we have an academic who works on creating low latency, semi-automated flight path approval plans for drones. If drones are ever to scale up, we need low latency, semi-automated systems for approving their flight paths. And so he has active live drone flight path approval operations in 3 major Australian cities and also overseas. So this is technology that is actually out in the real world being used. I'll show you one robot. This is our most famous robot. It's a killer robot, but it's widely regarded as a good killer robot. This is called QUT. QUT is an acronym for Crown of Thorns Starfish. Crown of Thorns Starfish is a pest. We have a major asset called the Great Barrier Reef. If you ever come down to Australia, please go visit it. So this robot patrolled the Great Barrier Reef, used early deep learning technology to do computer vision, to detect these systems using a camera, and then would stab the crown of thornfish with the biggest syringe you've ever seen with some sort of vinegar or other solution in it and would kill it. This is a process that was very slowly and very laboriously performed by human divers. Humans do not scale. They are very good at what they do, but the Great Barrier Reef is a huge, huge area. So the idea of this project is this is a theoretically endlessly scalable resource. And Google then gave us money to develop a fleet of subsequent robots, which are still in operation in many locations. One of the things we really specialize is going in from fundamental blue sky research all the way to highly applied work with industry partners, government partners, and startup partners around the world. And one of the interesting things is you learn a lot from that journey, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is also my research group. This is a recent lab dinner, so this is not my center. This is my personal research group or part of it. And really, our research group is driven by 2 motivations. Scientific curiosity. If you're still in academia, one of the pleasures you have is you can be driven by interesting questions, which don't necessarily make sense from an economic perspective, although that's slowly getting squeezed out of academia as well. We're also driven by the problems that our industry partners, like many of you in the room, bring to us. Some of these are easy, some of them are interesting, some of them not so much. We draw on biological inspiration heavily. We draw on neural inspiration. We do a lot of artificial neural networks of all varieties, including spiking neural networks, which I'll show you. We put these systems on robots and deployed system platforms. They never work the first time, the second time. They usually still don't work by the 10th or 20th time. But it's in this process of iteration and innovation and talking to our multidisciplinary collaborators that we learn interesting insights into the fundamental nature of problems like navigation, like perception. And sometimes in fixing these problems to create systems that are actually useful for our industry partners, we learn interesting things that we can then feed back to our collaborators from all these different disciplines. So I'll talk briefly about 4 pieces of work that were contributed. SLAM is an acronym in robotics for simultaneous localization and mapping. It's the problem that robots and humans and animals face of going into a new place, building a map or representation of that place, and simultaneously keeping track of where they're located within that map. It's a huge problem in robotics. The joke has been that this problem has been solved for many years, and yet it's still one of the largest research areas in robotics. So RAT-SLAM was a rat or mammalian brain inspired SLAM system. Why did we model animals? The same reason everyone in the room is interested in the brain. Animals are incredibly capable at everything that they do, and they are very generalist. So compared to a robot, which typically works very well under very specific circumstances, we know that rats are very generally capable. The brown rat, which was the primary inspiration of this work, has been spread throughout the world, but that rat that you find in completely different environments, from a desert to a sewer to an office building to a domestic home, it has roughly the same neural machinery and it has roughly the same sensing apparatus, yet in a very short lifetime, it's able to learn about its environment and prosper in this incredibly diverse range of situations. This is really inspirational for technologists. We know lots about the sensing of rodents. They're one of the most well-studied animals. We know what we can model in terms of their perception, and we know a lot about what happens inside their brains. So neuroscientists over the last 50 years especially have found all these amazing spatial correlate navigational cells. So cells that only respond when the rat is at a certain location, creatively named a place cell. You can see a heat map of a place cell where one particular neuron is firing in this environment, only at one place. And there are lots of other cells that respond to the orientation of the rat's head. There are grid cells that respond not just at one location, but at a triangular tessellating grid of locations over many scales. And there are also cells that respond at a certain distance from a barrier or a border of the environment. And this is heaven for a roboticist because we have some concrete targets we can go after to create intelligent robot systems. When we started this work, and there's been great talking to a lot of grad students, this was sort of a rough map of the understood connectivity of the system, and these diagrams change constantly. What we did is we created neural network models of the 2 core navigational cells known at the time: place cells that tell you where you are, and head direction cells that tell you which orientation your robot head is facing. What networks did we use? We used continuous attractor networks, which are really an old school network. But from a roboticist perspective, the reason we used these networks, and deep learning wasn't around at the time, was because they roughly emulated the dynamics of probabilistic filters and mapping systems in robotics, so Kalman filters and particle filters, which are used heavily in that field. These continuous attractor networks have crudely the same sort of dynamics, which is really useful. So this is this iterative cycle. We put it on robots, not very impressive, right? It's a robot moving around in a 2x2 yard arena. It's got some artificial cues. Even in this arena, this system could not keep track of where it was. So the navigational system sucked. It got lost very quickly. That's an error graph growing on the right side of the slide. So I have a full slide here, but basically the essence was we went back and looked at the then state-of-the-art neuroscience models, and the key problem was that the way that those models worked was they were not able to probabilistically, or even in a pseudo-probabilistic way, represent the inherent uncertainty. So when you're moving around, when a robot's moving around, you do not always know exactly where you are. Sometimes you are temporarily lost. In those situations, you need a system that can manage and propagate that uncertainty about where you are in the world until you see a familiar visual landmark, or someone tells you where you are, or you cheat and you pull out your phone and turn on your GPS. So this is the key problem. So many years of iteration, we created this final RAT-SLAM system, and I won't go into much detail, but on the left side, we have the neural networks. These neural networks effectively are the visual processing system for this robot, and the network in blue is called a pose cell network. If you've ever heard of the grid cells that won the Nobel Prize in 2014, these pose cells, this blue network, are similar, but by no means identical to these grid cells. In the videos I'll show you on the next slide, you'll see a graphical map unforming. That is the middle of this slide, which is like a graphical map. The reason we have a graphical map is the representation of space that these spatial neural networks learn becomes very confusing, very discontinuous, and very hard to interpret. So the graph is like an intuitive readout of what's happening in the system. So what could we do with this system? I'll show you two key experiments, which were breakthrough experiments at the time. One was we put it on a robot, let it explore the entire floor of a building, and then put it through a navigation stress test trial. So this robot chose 6 random locations on the floor to navigate to at random. So you can imagine it's like a delivery robot stress test. This was operating at all times of day and night. It was fully autonomous. There was no human input into the process, or pretty much no human input. And the system was remarkably stable. It did 1,177 successful navigation trials over this 2-week period out of 1,178. It did effectively a marathon, so about 25, 26 miles over 40 hours of operation. The most important part of this system, when we've talked about lifelong learning, is this system was continually learning a evolving map representation of the environment over the entire 2-week experiment. Even now, a lot of robot systems, you learn a map of the environment, you drive your robot around, and then you save the map and you never update it again, because updating a map continually leads to corruption issues and all sorts of other problems. And so that was the key aspect of this experiment. The other experiment we did was a scale experiment. So we put a couple of MacBook computers at the time and grabbed the sensory input from the inbuilt webcams and fed it into the system. So no GPS, no encoders on the wheels of the car, just the input from the camera. And we were able to create a topologically correct, about a 40-mile journey map of this environment. And at the time, this was the largest environment anyone had mapped with a camera-only or vision-only system. And this video has always captivated people, and so we've kept it in our slide decks for the last 15 years, actually. And one thing in retrospect, and obviously you have to be very careful with small sample sizes, but one of the things that got so much traction with these studies after getting our papers rejected and being told to go away and stop doing research was that these systems were state-of-the-art in terms of performance without any conditional statements attached to it. So it wasn't for a bio-inspired system, it was pretty good, or for a low-power system, it wasn't bad. It didn't have any of those disclaimers at the time, and only momentarily. It was the state of the art in the robotics field in these challenging problems. And that's, I think, why the robotics field was so receptive to this work. So flashing forward to the work we're working on now, 2 areas of neuromorphic or neuromorphic related research, one in spiking neural networks and one in dynamic vision sensors or event cameras. And this is credit to Samaya, a grad student, and Toby, a young academic, who are the leads on this research. So I'm not going to talk about or justify, because this is the great thing. Neuromorphic hardware is exciting and has lots of potential advantages. We've already talked about that at length. What we are trying to do is find killer applications that are perhaps unique to neuromorphic hardware. That is our primary mission here in the robotics space. And we do not have $100 million to do this, so we are picking off the low-hanging fruit in terms of what is most potential to lead to great results. So what we've done is we've adapted some of the current models, the Deal and Cook model, as applied to tasks like digit recognition, and everyone's talked about digit recognition and MNIST over the last couple of days, and we adapted it to the navigational task or localization task for learning of weights. That excitatory layer outputs an inhibitory layer that then backward inhibits the excitatory layer, and we interpret the excitatory layer in order to produce localization or positional estimates for the robot system. Now, there's a lot of machinery, if anyone's worked with these systems, to actually make this work at a performant level. And so we get neurons that are overrepresented and underrepresented in the system. So we do some pretty stock standard normalization of their involvement. We also deal with hyperactive neurons. So the paper that's coming out this year deals specifically with hyperactive neurons that want to be involved in everything. So there's some machinery and some tweaking behind the scenes to make these systems work. But in essence, and you can read these papers if you want more details, these systems are comparably performant, not better, but comparably performant with the state of the art in conventional computer vision systems, which, given the size of the networks, we think is a promising sign. One of the areas, and this comes down to the killer app we're looking at, is can we use these systems to map or represent or encode extremely large environments, global scale environments. And so one of the things we've discovered is these networks, as others have discovered in the room, are very amenable to modular ensemble-based approaches. So in this work, once again, this is in the publications, you can read, we create hundreds, thousands, and there's no reason you couldn't create millions or trillions of very small individual spiking neural networks. Each spiking neural network is only responsible in this particular paper for learning 25 locations in the world. That's its sole responsibility. And the largest neuronal layer in that network has 400 neurons in it. Very small, very compact networks, and they're given a very specific task. We chain or ensemble hundreds of thousands of these very small modular networks together. And when you do that, you can map and encode an arbitrarily large environment. It really depends on how much compute you have available. And even using the specifications of, I guess, low E and low E2 and what we think is available, you can map large enough environments that it's competitive with the state-of-the-art in conventional robotics, computer vision, and machine learning. And these networks are truly parallel, so they do not rely on any interconnections of the networks, which means it is ready to play on the neuromorphic hardware. The other area of neuromorphic inspired work we're working in is dynamic vision sensors, or the colloquial term is event cameras. So we haven't had quite as much on these this conference. The basic idea is these are a new type of camera hardware. They detect the change in the intensities of pixels in your image. If there is no change, they don't register anything, so there's no events generated. They also detect the polarity of the change of the intensity. So does the pixel get brighter or does it get darker? So you can see a visualization of this in the right compared to the conventional video. The blue and the red represent the two different polarities. And you can see sort of get an intuitive feel. So it's not doing edge detection, although it feels a little bit like that because the movement is most apparent at the high contrast edges. So this is what the abstracted view of an event camera looks like. Now, one of the really interesting things is you can reconstruct image representations from these streams of events that you get from these events, cameras. But the reconstruction time window over which you do that reconstruction is arbitrary. You can reconstruct an image from a 1 microsecond window, a 1 second window, or a 1,000 second window. You can choose whatever you want. Obviously, the image that pops out at the other end varies hugely, but you have this capability to reconstruct over different timescales that you don't directly have with conventional cameras. So that's a unique, interesting advantage. The thing we've done so far is, once again, ensembling approaches. So without, again, going into the details, what we do is we reconstruct images from these event camera streams over a range of different temporal timescales, ranging from like a few milliseconds to like 150 or 250 milliseconds. So we get lots of different image representations. We run each of those image representations through our navigational pipeline in parallel. We get estimates of where the robot is located in the environment in parallel from each of these systems, and then we ensemble it all together. And it works incredibly well. So this is a performance graph at the top left. All you need to know is that the vertical y-axis better performance is further higher up on the graph, and the x-axis is the reconstruction window duration from 0 to 150 milliseconds. The performance of our ensemble system is the black dashed dot line at the top of the graph. It's constant because it's a single system. It ensembles reconstruction durations across this entire reconstruction window. And we have some baseline comparisons of systems doing reconstruction on an individual timescale shown in the pink and brown lines. So ours is both consistent, well, there's a single performance figure for our system, which is much better than the other systems. And you can see other systems also vary, and this varies depending on which environment you're in as well. One of the great opportunities in neuromorphic and event cameras is investigating concepts that have worked well in computer vision and machine learning and seeing how well they play in the event camera or the neuromorphic space. So one of the ones we're looking at is spike-based perception salience. So this is the whole idea, well trodden in biology, that every part of what you're looking at is not treated equally. You pay particular attention to certain parts of the scene, things like gist, because they have more saliency or more relevance to what you're trying to do. So what we've done is we've used some very simple proxies for perceptual salience. So once again, these are the simple first steps, but they're very promising. So one of the things we've done is we've looked at the variance in the event frequency on a per pixel basis and used that as a direct proxy of visual salience. And so if a particular pixel in the camera over a data set tends to vary a lot, sometimes it has lots of events, sometimes it has no events, we consider that a salient pixel. If it doesn't vary much, we consider it a non-salient. There's no learning in this. This is a direct translation from event variance to salience. And you can see an image of the salient pixels on the bottom right. So everywhere that there is a blue circle, that is considered a particular salient pixel. The reason that we have blue pixels spread all over the place is we have local suppression. So once we find a salient pixel, we suppress the finding of any salient pixels in its immediate vicinity. The exciting or super exciting part about this, and once again, this stuff is in these papers, some of which will come out. Actually, no, both of these papers are out already. This is another performance graph. Once again, better performance is higher up on the graph. So the vertical axis is recall at 99% precision. Higher up on the graph means better performance. The x-axis, the horizontal axis, is the number of pixels we're using. And what we're showing is that the blue bars are the system that considers salience, uses our contribution, and the orange bars are the ones that just pick random pixels. So this is a localization task. So two takeaways. One is using salience improves performance. The blue bars are always somewhat better than the orange bars. But which is annoying because this wasn't our primary contribution, what is really amazing is that you can use an incredibly small number of pixels from this image and get very, very high performance at a navigational task. So as soon as you get to sort of 5 or 10 pixels, you're getting useful levels of navigation performance. So this is 5 or 10 pixels out of, I think, 250,000 pixels, which is really incredible. So it's not a camera, you're using it more like a couple of laser beams pointing out into the environment, which is really fascinating. This doesn't necessarily happen with conventional cameras. So in doing all this work, I was guilty of being very cynical about event cameras and spiking neural networks when I first looked at them many, many years ago, and then the enthusiasm of many people, including people in this community, brought me around. The key questions that really we think of in terms of the field is what substantive benefits do neuromorphic approaches provide? Are these benefits genuinely unique to neuromorphic spiking neural networks event cameras, or do they also apply to conventional systems? If they do apply to conventional systems, that's not a deal breaker, but it helps categorize the type of research. And where there are discrepancies, where neuromorphic genuinely seems to have some unique promise, can you mechanistically explain? And that's the sort of battle that we're right in the midst of, because there's not a lot of tools for analyzing these systems and how they work. All right. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to do in this project, and there's aspects of neuromorphic, there's aspects of machine learning, there's aspects of multiple disciplines and inspiration, is we're trying to create a viable, ubiquitous alternative to GPS. So basically a positioning service layer that is available everywhere people and robots go, that also acts as a redundancy or a backup to GPS. There are many scenarios where GPS temporarily or permanently goes down, and modern society is incredibly reliant on it in many ways that even as technologists, we're not necessarily aware of. The key aspect of this project is it is not driven by tech considerations, it's driven by societal acceptance considerations first. So no technology is any use unless society accepts it. So at the core of this approach, informing the entire technological development, many projects in defense. So for the final part of my talk, I want to talk about one. I have three things, but I'm just going to talk about one. You can ask me about the others if you want. And this is the critical importance of introspective capability for AI and autonomous systems and robots. And really, this is part, I guess, something we've encountered time and time again. So our whole goal here is to scale autonomy and positioning and navigation systems in both scale and space, from microsecond latency positioning systems for high-speed platforms to millimeter precise positioning systems for surgical robotics. These are all projects we're working on, all the way up to global scale navigation and robots that can endure in their environment for many, many years. So we're trying to address the whole ecosystem. And we're agnostic. As you saw, we attack this from lots of different problems. We'll use any technique that gets us some advances in terms of our capability. One of the things about creating systems that work in the long term is you can do it from a algorithmic approach, and this is the video at the top left, a vision-based approach. You can do it from a bio-inspired approach, and you can do it from a computer vision approach. So we're attacking this problem from all these areas, and each area has different strengths and weaknesses to give. One of the things we've learned about in translating into more applied applications is the critical, I would argue, the most important property, which is introspection. So I'll give a simple example. You're trying to equip a robot, a drone, an autonomous vehicle with a positioning system. You have two choices. System one works 99.9% of the time. It's really good. It'll get you a paper in the top tier conference because that's the number they care about. But the remaining time, it doesn't know when it's failing. So it doesn't know what it doesn't know. You've got system two that only works 99% of the time. Not going to get into that conference. You may struggle to get your PhD, unfortunately, because that's the number they care about. But of the 1% of the time that it's not working, 99% of that time, it knows that it's in trouble. That's the key distinction. Using system one, you will unwittingly make incorrect decisions based on incorrect information 0.1% of the time. System two is vastly superior to system one for any operationally critical deployment of AI, automation, or robots. You would have heard about this talked about in terms of provability, trusted autonomy, guaranteed performance bounds, explainability as well. These are all terms that all mean slightly different things. They're fuzzy terms in the field at the moment, so it's a bit hard to nail them down, but this is sort of the general context of what I'm talking about. Why is this so important? Two reasons. One is if your system knows when it's struggling, and this could be an AI system in a data center, it could be a robot or an autonomous vehicle, it can implement a fail-safe behavior, but it has to know it's in trouble to do it in the first place. The other thing is we're increasingly realizing that most automation will not be fully autonomous. Most autonomy is going to have some level of human collaboration, human supervision, human in the loop. It might be a tiny, tiny bit, but that's the reality across many, many fields. And if the robot or the autonomous system knows when it's struggling, that facilitates collaboration, it facilitates handover. And you will want handover in both directions. So people who are working with the systems also have to know when they're struggling so they can hand over to the autonomous system. And so introspection is critical for all of these things. If you're modeling biological systems, introspection is really important because if you're struggling, you can learn. You can trigger a period of learning. You can relearn your representations of the world. If you detect that you're really struggling, you can completely learn your entire paradigm about how you represent and encode the world around you. This is another project that we're involved in, a surgical robotics project. We're training a robot to do one task in shoulder joint replacement surgery and one task only. It's not replacing a surgeon. To place this guide wire very repeatedly into the bone. All the rest of the surgical outcomes depend on the precise and reliable placement of this guide wire. And so this is a task that robots theoretically should be very good at, but the robot won't always be able to do it. If the robot doesn't know when it's struggling, it won't know to ask the surgeon who's in the theater with them for help. The surgeon looking at the robot will not necessarily know that the robot is in trouble. So introspection is critically important across so many different activities. And we talked about lifelong learning. If to have really capable AI or autonomous systems, we will need to have these systems learning in an online manner. the tension here is that if you turn on online learning in your autonomous system, equipping it with reliable introspection becomes pathologically more difficult. And this is the fundamental tension. I think this is where the grand challenge will be in our field or in the AI field moving forward. So we've done this, I won't go into detail on this, but we've done this in a navigation context for an autonomous vehicle. Basically, let me just show the animation rather than the details. This is led by one of my grad students, Helen, where you develop a system that you can put over the top of any AI task. The AI system could be doing navigation, it could be object recognition, it could be medical scan analysis, whatever it is. And the system goes over the top of it and it evaluates what the underlying system is saying and says, yes, you can trust that, or no, you can't trust that. And the details are in the paper, but this is not using sophisticated machine learning techniques. This is using support vector machines and some basic statistics. And even using these simplistic techniques, the system works really well. And let's see. I won't go into the details, but there are more details in the paper. Basically, it allows you to use a baseline system doing object recognition and run that baseline system in a much more carefree manner where it makes a lot more mistakes, because this verification system you put over the top of it will get rid of a lot of the mistakes. And that's the key benefit of a system like this. And that's the key point I wanted to make. It's interesting to think about this from a neural perspective. So how is uncertainty encoded and acted upon in the brain? But I guess from a neuromorphic aspect, I would suspect, and there's some interesting early work on uncertainty in spiking neural networks that is out in the community. I would be very interested in what relatively small, compact, I know we're talking about scaling, but what relatively small, compact, high performance spiking neural networks in neuromorphic hardware, whether we can better characterize uncertainty and whether we can better implement measures of introspection in these systems. All right. I've been really fortunate to be invited to a few of these. When Darish and I were hanging out in Crete last year, it's always nice to get an email saying we'll pay for all your expenses and fly you over, and we'll also pay or support your students or postdocs to come over as well. So that's how we ended up in Greece together. And it's interesting attending all these events. So these are robotics, AI, neuroscience events. They're intimate discussion symposiums. You really get into some deep, frank discussion at these events. And this is just the last 9 months. And so I guess just to reassure everyone, everyone is freaked out about these new AI developments. Nothing is specific to this field. We all know this, but everyone is freaking out. The neuroscientists are perhaps freaking out more than the people in this room, which is really interesting. What are the unique advantages Neuromorphic has in either responding to or proactively leveraging these new AI techniques that are really disrupting everything? One of the things that's really interesting is listening to the open panel mics. And one of the things that I've seen in a lot of these other fields is that you do and I think we all know this, you do genuinely need basic science researchers who are not tied to specific industry outcomes, driving the foundational machine of research in the field. You also do need those ruthlessly opportunistic, very single-minded people going after the most lucrative potential commercialization, killer impact style things. One of the things that's really apparent is everyone in this room is aware of the potential use cases and the pressure to try and find applications. And this is going to sound like a criticism, but it's not a criticism. Compared to the other fields, it sounds like you have more people sort of in the middle who are doing the fundamental research, but are also trying to think about killer applications. And not many people, and maybe it's just the invitees to this conference, not many people at the extremes, or not as many people at the extremes as you'd see in many other fields. If you walked into a different audience with a different bunch of technicians, technical people or CTOs, and it wasn't on the public record, you would encounter people who do not care about energy consumption at all, even though they say so publicly. And really, the nuances are important. So when you say, or when someone says, this is a more energy efficient system, that is fine as long as it is roughly performant at a comparable level to the state-of-the-art equipment. If it does not perform as well, then the energy efficiency can't compensate for that in most cases. And this is something, we're in robotics, we have the same problems. This is something we encounter. Lower energy consumption does not compensate for something being substantially inferior in performance, except in specific applications where you can perhaps combine lots of those low energy things and get your performance back up there, for example. And there was a lot of talking about doing what other fields have done at the beginning. I found this really interesting because I came here and everyone is warm and supportive and constructive. Everyone seems to know each other. And that is a wonderful thing. And I've seen other fields destroy themselves by going after these more ambitious sort of things. It's been really joyous to see everyone be so supportive. We're just walking around the posters, listening to the constructive feedback. I didn't see any crying grad students, which is a great thing. That is a really wonderful thing, and a lot of fields don't have it, especially the bigger fields. Obviously, the big fields are also good as well, but small fields are particularly good. One of the other things that we've seen is things that you observe work in other fields. The transferability of those concepts to benefit your field varies hugely. So benchmarking data sets, open source code, all those sort of things, the utility of that in each field, it's not the same. And so with limited resources, it's interesting to think about what does transfer well and what doesn't. If you're interested in collaboration, we have a huge robotics center. We can put your neuromorphic devices on robots and do cool things with them. So if you're interested in collaboration, if you're interested in big US Australian consortiums, which is very much on the cards at the moment, come and talk to me. Lots of open source code, survey papers, lots of our projects are online, which I haven't talked about. We're always hiring. We have roles from research engineers all the way up to tenure track faculty at the moment, all available, come chat. And if you're a grad student or an ECR or a jilted prof, I'm very passionate about mentoring. I do a lot of it, and I run a channel called Hacking Academia, which gives you all the advice that you're not officially supposed to say, but I say it anyway. So have a look at it. There's a big YouTube channel on it. Thanks to our supporters. Some of them are mentioned here over the many, many years we've been doing research, and all of our collaborators from all around the world. Thanks to the organizers for the invite, and thanks for listening.